I adopted my little sister after parent passed away because no one else wanted to. Then even my girlfriend tried to call the CPS on me. I'm Liam, 24 male. I just graduated a year ago. Back then, my life was so peaceful. My parents and my 8-year-old sister, Lily, were my whole world. My dad was a construction engineer and my mom a teacher. Both were always busy. My sister was a mischievous little kid, incredibly smart with a radiating smile. Our family was always brimming with happiness and laughter. Then one day, my entire world completely fell apart. It was June 5th. My parents were on their way home from my Uncle David's house outside the city. The road through the forest was deserted, usually with very few cars passing by. It was getting dark when suddenly a gigantic moose dashed out. My dad, who was driving, slammed on the brakes and swerved to avoid it. The car lost control and crashed head-on into a large tree by the roadside. The impact was so severe that everything went silent instantly. My parents, they were gone forever, right there, at the scene. They didn't have time to say a word. They didn't even know what was happening.
The next morning, a passerby discovered the car. The police called me. My hands trembled as I held the phone. "We regret to inform you. Your parents." My ears rang. The police officer's voice sounded so distant. My whole world crumbled beneath my feet. I rushed there like a madman. Seeing the scene, I couldn't breathe. The funeral was a blur. People came and went in a constant stream, aunts and uncles embracing us, expressing their grief. Lily clung to me, silent. She didn't shed a single tear or utter a word, just stood there quietly like a forgotten doll amidst the wreckage. Her silence was more terrifying than any cry. Looking at her pale face and dark-circled eyes, I knew our lives, Lily's and mine, had changed forever. My heart felt squeezed. I held her hand tightly, feeling her last bit of warmth, trying to brace myself from crumbling. I had to be strong. I had to live for her, even though inside, I was just as broken. After the funeral, it was decided that Lily would go live with our maternal grandmother, Eleanor. Honestly, if there's any place that felt more stifling than a graveyard, it was her house. I knew Grandma Eleanor's personality all too well. When I was a kid, every summer I had to stay at her house. And if I did anything she disliked, she'd immediately hit me. Her eyes would be icy cold, completely devoid of affection. The moment we stepped inside, I felt an uncomfortable atmosphere hanging heavy in the air. Grandma Eleanor didn't even bother to hide her obvious displeasure. Lily just cowered behind me like a shadow. Grandma looked at her, then sighed deeply. "Oh great, now there's this burden too," she muttered, loud enough for me to hear, yet pretending to talk to herself. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to hold back. Lily, though silent, I could see her shoulders trembling in waves. My heart ached. That very evening, without wasting a minute, she pulled me aside, her face resolute. "Liam," she began, her voice flat like she was reading a report. "I'm old. I can't take care of the girl," she continued. "My health is failing and I'm full of ailments. Besides, I'm not used to looking after children." I knew she wanted nothing to do with Lily or me, but her next words truly left me speechless. Or you could just take her to an orphanage. They have more experience. They'll take better care of her." At that point, I couldn't take it anymore. I knew she was my mother's birth mother, but the indifference she displayed made my blood boil. I looked her straight in the eyes and said firmly, "No, if you won't raise her, I will. She's my sister. She's my family. I'll take care of her myself." I knew that when I spoke those words, all the burdens from that moment on would fall squarely on my shoulders. But I had no regrets. Lily had already lost her parents. I couldn't let her suffer any more pain. Lily was the only family I had left. I would do everything for her. So from that day on, Lily moved in with me and Lila. Lila, 22 and female, is my girlfriend. We've been together for 7 years, since high school. She's beautiful, smart, and in her final year of university. We'd been living together for over a year, planning to get officially engaged once she graduated. Our apartment is small, with just a living room, 1 bedroom, and a kitchen, but I did my best to create a private space for Lily. I added a small bed in my bedroom for her to sleep on, cleared out my closet to make room for her toys and clothes. I even bought some of the comic books and stuffed animals that Lily likes. I wanted her to feel like this was her home, her safe place. However, things weren't as easy as I thought. Lily was still deeply traumatized. She barely spoke, hardly uttering a word unless I directly asked her something or she needed to use the restroom. She was like a shadow, silently following me around the house. Nights were the worst.
She started fearing the dark and having endless nightmares. In the middle of the night, I often heard soft whimpers and moans from the small bed next to mine. My heart would ache. I knew she was dreaming of our parents again. I'd have to crawl over, hold her tight, and comfort her until she drifted back to sleep. I ended up sleeping with Lily many nights, sometimes not returning to my own bed until almost dawn. Initially, Lila tried to be understanding, but I could see the forced expression on her face. Gradually, that understanding vanished. Lila began to openly complain, repeatedly talking about not having enough time for us. She'd say, "Liam, since Lily moved in, we don't have any private space. I'm starting to miss our evenings, just the two of us." These complaints were mild compared to what came next. Slowly, Lila began to visibly avoid Lily. Normally, she'd come home early and cook, but not anymore. She started coming home later, citing essays and study groups. The excuses piled up. She even found ways to avoid picking Lily up from school. One time, I arrived to pick Lily up and saw her lingering by the school gate, her eyes searching for anyone familiar. It pained me to see that.
I know Lila has her own pressures, but this is Lily. This is my sister. She just went through a horrific shock. She needs attention, she needs love, but Lila, she seems to be living in her own world, a world where there's no room for my and Lily's burdens. I started to see a huge crack in our relationship, and honestly, I don't know how to mend it. Update 2. Raising a child is no joke, especially one as traumatized as Lily. Everything costs money, from food and school fees to the expenses for therapy sessions and medication. I have a decent job, but now my salary just vanishes like smoke. I've started cutting back on personal expenses, from eating out to my favorite tech gadgets. There are even times I have to find ways to work overtime just to make ends meet. The financial pressure weighs on me like a boulder. In my desperation, I immediately thought of Uncle David and Aunt Sarah. Although I knew they weren't well off, they were still some of my only remaining relatives. At the very least, they could offer me advice or help look after Lily when I was busy. I took a chance and visited them, bringing a small gift for my cousins. I told my aunt and uncle about my situation, about Lily, and all the difficulties I was facing. Uncle David sat silently, his face full of contemplation. Aunt Sarah nodded, occasionally sighing. Finally, she spoke, her voice filled with apprehension. "Liam, I know you're struggling, but, Uncle David has a heart condition and can't work. I work at a nursing home, and my salary is barely enough to get by. Plus, we have to take care of the kids. Their schooling is very expensive. Little Tommy is only 5 years old and also needs care." She went on and on about their family's hardships. I listened, feeling awkward. It was clear they weren't willing to help me. Then Uncle David, after a moment of silence, spoke up. "But Liam, you've been through so much hardship already," he said, his face suddenly brightening. "I heard the government has an orphan's allowance, right? They say it's quite a bit. If you're finding it too difficult, Lily can stay with us when you're busy, but it would be reasonable for us to split that allowance. Wouldn't it?" I froze. His words utterly shocked me. Was my own uncle really suggesting splitting the orphan's allowance of his niece? It didn't stop there. Aunt Sarah added, her voice casual as if it were nothing. "Oh, also, did your parents leave behind any valuable assets that you haven't used yet? If so, your uncle and I could help you keep them safe, and we could also sell a little bit to take care of Lily when needed." At this point, I was truly speechless. Their greed was so clearly etched on my aunt and uncle's faces. I tried to stay calm, told them I'd manage everything myself, and stood up to leave. Walking out of their house, I felt an overwhelming sense of disappointment. First my grandmother, and now my own aunt and uncle. In this world, there truly are some relatives you just can't count on. They only think of their own benefit. Lily and I, we were far more alone than I had ever imagined.
Not only that, but at home, Lila's attitude became increasingly blatant. She no longer tried to hide her anger and frustration. Every time I came home from work, the atmosphere in the apartment was as heavy as lead. She would constantly make passive-aggressive remarks about how much I had changed, or even suggest that I no longer loved her as I used to. Listening to it exhausted me terribly. I knew she was implying Lily, but I couldn't abandon her. Then one evening, the peak of Lila's selfishness erupted. We were eating dinner. Lily and I were trying to have a conversation while Lila remained completely silent. Suddenly, she put her chopsticks down with a sharp clack. "Liam," Lila said, her voice icy cold, "we need to talk seriously." She looked directly at me, her eyes devoid of emotion. "I can't continue like this. I'm not ready to be a mother, and I don't want to be a mother at this age." I froze, dumbfounded. Who was asking her to be a mother? "I think you should seriously reconsider entrusting Lily to someone else," Lila continued, her voice flat like a robot. "Uncle David and Aunt Sarah are still relatives after all. Or else, an orphanage. They have more experience there and better facilities." What the hell was she saying? An orphanage? My heart felt squeezed. I looked at her, my eyes filled with disappointment. "What the hell are you saying, Lila? She's my sister. How dare you say such things when she's right here?" Lila shrugged, her face expressionless. "That's your and her problem. You chose this, but I didn't." After saying that, she walked off somewhere, not even bothering to look at us. Lily, as always, didn't say much, but the way she clutched my shirt broke my heart. I knelt down and hugged her tightly. But that wasn't all. Trouble kept knocking on our door. The very next morning, while I was at work, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. On the other end, a middle-aged woman's voice, very serious, spoke. "Hello, Mr. Liam. I'm Miss Miller from Child Protective Services, CPS. We've received an anonymous report concerning the care of your niece Lily. They stated that the child appears to be neglected and not properly cared for." CPS. I froze. My hand trembled, almost dropping the phone. I tried to calm myself, assuring Miss Miller that wasn't the case at all, that Lily was being very well cared for and that she was just suffering from trauma. However, Miss Miller stated that they would send someone to investigate in the next few days. After hanging up, my head was spinning. Who? Who could do such a dirty trick? Who could be so heartless as to make such a baseless accusation against me when I was trying my best to keep my family together? That afternoon I returned home, my heart heavy. I saw Lila sitting and watching TV, and immediately a strong sense of unease welled up inside me. I tried to keep my voice as calm as possible. "This morning I received a call from CPS. Do you know anything about this, Lila?" Lila turned to look at me, her eyes blinking. "CPS? What's that, Liam? I don't know anything." She denied it immediately, her voice seemingly surprised. But I noticed a certain evasiveness in her eyes. When I tried to press her for more details about who might have made the report, she stammered, then quickly changed the subject. That slight hesitation, though small, planted a seed of doubt in my mind. The seed of doubt about Lila continued to grow. A few days later, Miss Miller and a colleague came to my apartment. They observed the home and asked about Lily's daily routine. I led them to my room, showed them Lily's small bed, her toy cabinet, and her therapy schedule. Miss Miller asked Lily a few gentle questions, but the child only nodded or shook her head, clinging tightly to me. They requested that I provide Lily's medical records, including reports from her therapist and her vaccination history. I provided everything, explaining that I was doing everything I could to support her. After their thorough check, Miss Miller stated, "We can see you're trying your best." She continued, "However, I still observe many signs that Lily's emotional state isn't stable. Additionally, this anonymous report requires further investigation to verify its origin. We will contact you again later." I still suspected Lila was the one who falsely accused me, but I had no proof. Our trust in each other had cracked to an irreparable degree. One evening, Lila and I argued again. I don't even remember what it was about, but it was generally the same old tune. Lila complaining about not having her own space, not having time for herself. Her voice grew increasingly harsh, sometimes even rising to a shout. I tried to remain calm, keeping my voice low. But in the heat of the moment, Lila said something that froze me. "Look at what that child is doing to your life. She's a burden. Do you think I can stay with you if things continue like this?" Immediately, I jumped up and yelled, "What did you just say about my sister?" At that moment, I didn't notice, but Lily had heard everything. She was sitting in the hallway playing with her stuffed animals, and she had heard Lila call her a burden. Heard Lila wanting me to give Lily to someone else. From that day on, Lily changed dramatically. She not only became even more withdrawn, but also displayed more disturbing behaviors. She started drawing gloomy pictures. They were all of a tiny little girl standing alone in a dark void surrounded by shadowy figures. Then I also noticed Lily began biting her nails. At first it was just gentle biting, but then she kept biting and biting until her nails bled and became swollen. When I asked, she would just shake her head and pull her hands away. All of this drove me crazy with worry. One Sunday afternoon, I returned from my part-time job to find the apartment empty. Lily wasn't in her room. Her small backpack was also gone. My heart pounded. I frantically searched the entire house. Suddenly, I saw a small piece of paper, neatly folded, lying on her desk. It was her childish handwriting. "Brother Liam, I'm sorry. I know I'm a burden. I won't stay with you anymore." Reading that, my whole body collapsed. My hands trembled, the letter falling to the floor. The child! She thought she was such a burden that she wanted to leave? It was all Lila's fault. Her malicious words had planted those terrible thoughts in Lily's head. Tears streamed down my face, but the pain wouldn't allow me to mourn for long. I had to find her. Immediately, I drove around the area asking everyone I saw. Finally, after more than an hour, I found Lily. She was huddled in the park near our apartment, her backpack lying beside her. Luckily, she hadn't gone too far. I rushed over and pulled her into a hug, tears streaming down my face. She sobbed uncontrollably in my arms, the first time she had cried so loudly since the accident. I knew it was time to have a frank conversation with Lila. Everything needed to be clear. I was ready for a fight. Update 3. When we got home, I saw Lila already there, watching TV with a nonchalant expression as if nothing had happened. She didn't even bother to acknowledge Lily and me. I sat Lily down next to me, then looked directly at Lila. "Lila, we need to talk." My voice sounded strange, much deeper than usual. Lila turned off the TV, sighing loudly, as if I were inconveniencing her. "What is it now, Liam? I've already said everything." "No, you haven't," I growled, holding out Lily's letter in front of her. "Explain this. Why do you think she wrote this? Do you know Lily just ran away from home because of the things you said?" Upon seeing the letter, Layla's face immediately paled. But it was only for a moment before she regained her cold demeanor. "Well, you know why, don't you? I've already told you that child is messing up our lives. I don't want this responsibility." She stood up abruptly, walked right in front of me, and then she uttered the words I will never forget. "You have to choose, Liam. Between me and her, who do you choose?" My hands clenched into fists. Hot blood rushed to my head. Choose? She was making me choose between her and my orphaned, traumatized little sister? The thought was so venomous I couldn't believe it came from the person I had loved for 7 years. I didn't recognize who she was anymore. The pain, disappointment, and anger erupted all at once. I looked directly into Lila's eyes, my voice trembling but resolute, each word etched into the air. "I will never give up my sister. Never." I took a deep breath, then looked at her with an icy stare. "If you can't accept that, then it's time for you to leave." Lila froze, shocked, disbelieving her ears. Her mouth hung open, her face pale. What are you saying? What do you mean by that?" She tried to reason, her voice beginning to tremble. "You'll regret this. You bastard. You'll lose everything because of that little girl." I stood there, looking at her like a stranger. 7 years together. But now I have finally seen her true colors. Before leaving, Lila shot me a sharp glare, then slammed the door shut, vanishing from my life. The sound of the door closing was like a knife cutting through everything. She was gone. The apartment suddenly became eerily silent. I collapsed onto the sofa, my body feeling utterly drained. Not because I regretted Lila, not at all, but because of the immense relief that had finally arrived and the extreme exhaustion after weeks of struggle. I closed my eyes, feeling a huge weight lift from my shoulders. Suddenly, a tiny hand touched my cheek. It was Lily. She climbed onto the sofa, sat beside me, and slowly wrapped her arms around me. She didn't say anything, just hugged me tightly. Her small warmth was like a balm soothing my soul. In that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. Lily was all I needed. 2 days later, while resting on the sofa after work, I discovered that Lila's email was still logged in on my old laptop that I usually left at home. And thanks to that oversight, I found the email Lila sent to CPS, making the false accusation. My heart pounded. So it was just as I suspected. Lila herself had reported me. A mix of rage and pain surged through me. She had gone that far. I immediately contacted Ms. Miller to tell her about my discovery. We will investigate Lila for making a false report and potential harassment. This behavior can lead to serious legal consequences for her, especially when it involves child welfare, Ms. Miller continued. Hearing this, I saw a glimmer of hope. Karma. It was coming. Lila finally would have to face the consequences for her malicious actions. She chose to harm an orphan child and the person who had loved her for 7 years. Now she would have to pay the price. Final update. Layla is gone. Everything feels like we've just weathered a massive storm. The apartment is noticeably quieter, yet there's a strange sense of relief. So I rolled up my sleeves and started cleaning the place. A few days later, Ms. Miller from CPS called me again. She not only informed me about the investigation into Layla, but also became a wonderful advocate for me. She introduced me to many support groups for single-parent families raising orphan children and guided me on how to apply for more comprehensive aid funds. Suddenly, I no longer felt alone. There are people who aren't blood relatives, but who are willing to lend a helping hand. Most importantly, Lily is slowly but surely recovering. She no longer bites her nails. The nightmares are gradually becoming less frequent. At first, she only whispered, but then she started talking more, telling stories about school and her friends. She also smiles more than before. Her laughter is clear as bells. One morning, Lily brought me a drawing. In it, she and I were holding hands, standing under a large tree, with the sun shining brightly. Lily said, "This is our home, Liam." Looking at that picture warmed my heart. Lily's grades at school also started to improve significantly. Her teachers even praised her for being much more sociable than before. My life still has many challenges, but I've learned how to balance everything. I've learned to manage my finances more strictly, prioritizing what's most important. I realized this burden isn't a burden at all. It's the motivation to make me stronger. I am no longer the confused recent graduate. I am Lily's brother, and I will do everything to make her happy. Now, I have to tell you about Layla's ending. After that CPS report, she was investigated and fined. I heard whispers that she faced incredible difficulty finding internships later on. Her friends also became less enthusiastic once they learned about what had happened. Furthermore, I was the one who had financially supported her throughout her last 2 years of university. Now that we've broken up, she's finally realizing how comfortable her life used to be. And what about Lily and me? Our life isn't perfect. Honestly, it's still often a struggle. I still have to count every penny and work incredibly hard. But looking at Lily, I know it's all worth it. Letting go of Lila was a painful decision, but it was also the best one I've ever made. Once that rotten part was cut out of our lives, everything naturally became so much brighter. I realized that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who are willing to stand by you unconditionally when you're at your weakest. Love isn't something you can weigh on a scale and choose, especially when it concerns a little soul who has just lost everything. I want to tell all of you watching this video, life isn't always a bed of roses. There will be times when you face tragedy, difficult choices, and even the cruelty of people you once trusted. But remember, never give up on the ones you love most, the ones who truly need you. And sometimes, to truly build a strong home in life, you have to dare to tear down what's rotten and holding you back. Now, Lily is sound asleep. I look at her and feel the warmth and peace through her small head of hair. We've weathered the biggest storm, and I know that no matter what the future holds, we will always have each other. Forever family. Thank you for listening to today's story from the Guilty Notes channel. If this story resonated with you, please like, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional real-life stories and valuable lessons. See you in the next video.